Greetings and good afternoon. Welcome to Interfaith Paths to Peace. My name's Judd Hendricks, and this is our Friday noon Enneagram Community of Practice. We meet every Friday to explore all things Enneagram, and I want to welcome you to today's program where we are looking at a deep dive into the Enneagram 8, the leader or the challenger. And I think this one is especially meaningful and important because I believe that our current President Trump, is an Enneagram 8. And understanding the Enneagram number and where our personality comes from is one of the ways that we cultivate compassion and empathy for others. And so I'm really interested and excited to delve into the Enneagram 8 with you today. In some ways, specifically to have compassion for those that we often have difficult time relating with. And 8s tend to be, on the Enneagram, one of the types that's difficult for a lot of people to relate to. And so we'll explore today some of the deeper psychological dynamics around Enneagram 8 personality types in order to cultivate an open heart and compassion for 8s in our lives, and hopefully learn how to relate with them better in more creative and loving ways. So welcome to our time together today. If you're joining us on Facebook, there will be an opportunity for you to respond. You're welcome to put things in the chat box, and we will bring those into our conversation as we go. So if you have questions or comments, you're also welcome to join us on Zoom to engage in that conversation. So welcome. I will begin with or use a PowerPoint program to explore the Enneagram 8. And this PowerPoint presentation, I'm happy to send you a link to. It's on Prezi. If you want to do further study, I'm always happy to share this as a resource. And always happy to create workshops or Enneagram deep dives for organizations or businesses. I think it's a really powerful and helpful tool to understand family relationships and work relationships. So if you're ever interested in that, feel free to give me a call. It's one of the things I love to talk about. So again, Enneagram personality profiles, it's a way of understanding. The Enneagram is divided into 9 different types, and the Enneagram is broken down into 3 different sections. There's the gut triad, which is the 8, the 9, and the 1. And they're primarily working with issues of anger or gut instinct and have their fixation in that area of their body. The 2, the 3, and the 4 are what we call the heart triad. They're primarily working with emotions and issues of identity. And then there's the 5, 6, and the 7, which are primarily working in the head space, or they're called the doing triad, or working with anxiety and fear. And again, there is a core fixation around which these numbers have energy, and a lot of times we talk about doing work at that area of their core fixation. But they all express that core fixation differently. And today we're moving up into the into the gut triad, or the instinctual triad, or the anger triad. And we'll look at how the leader, the number 8, manifests that energy. And it's an energy often around control, which the 8, the 9, and the 1 are primarily working with issues of control, and they just do that in different ways. So today we'll explore the 8. I want to go into one of the things that we look at with all of the Enneagram numbers are levels of health. Again, a level of health has to do with how free you are from your personality, both perception and tendencies, how open you are. And so we talk about levels of health. And so here's some descriptors of healthy 8s. They're often called the leader or the challenger. They're often very self-confident, strong, and assertive. They stand up for their needs and their wants. And they also can do that for others. At healthy levels, eights can be very protective and standing up for the needs and wants of other people. They can be like a mama bear or a papa bear that cares for their cubs, and in many ways, really strong leaders care for their employees, and they'll stand up for them. And healthy eights can be pretty emotionally connected and engaged as leaders when they're healthy. They're often very resourceful. They have a strong inner drive. They take it upon themselves to be leaders. Um, they often know what they want. There's kind of a lust in them, a lust for power. Um, but that also is a real good energy in the world. And when eights are healthy, they can be really dynamic leaders. They have a strong sense of vision and where they're going, and want to take action to do that. They are decisive and authoritative, and they take initiative to get things done. And again, they champion other people and uplift other people, can stand with and behind other people when they're healthy. When that moves down, and what we talk about moving down is that they begin to get locked into patterns of perception and also behaviors, even when those perceptions may not be full, or the responses may not be accurate to the situation. And that's what we begin seeing as eights move down. They get much more concerned with control. And we're going to talk about trust a lot. Eights have a real difficulty with trust of others. And when they begin unhealthy, they begin to want to control. They become highly pragmatic at getting the resources they need in order to get a sense of control of their lives. And they can become proud and very domineering, very egocentric. And again, this is because they're trying to get their needs met and don't trust other people to do that. They want other people to back them up, and so they're really working with trust. And if they don't feel that trust, they can be very confrontational and trying to get that and trying to build trust. And everything becomes a contest of wills, and they seldom back down. So they get very domineering in their perspectives, and sometimes can be very controlling in their perspectives. So that's an average health. If you move further down into unhealth or unhealthy levels, here you really do see some of the challenges of eights. They become really hard-hardened and can become ruthless even in trying to get their needs met and trying to control others. They'll do anything to keep from being controlled. That's their fear, is that they will be controlled. And so they will do anything really to keep from that. And it's often by controlling others. They can be mavericks, outlaws, and they can be very vindictive of those that don't trust them. And they can even become kind of predatory and dangerous to other people at their lower levels of health, which all of us in some ways become. But eights have an energy and a force behind them that when they're unhealthy can really be challenging to other people, and can be destructive and dangerous as well. Now, one of the things that's really important, again, with Enneagram is, and this is where we can really cultivate a sense of compassion for all of us, especially when we realize that personality structure is basically put in place as young children try to thrive and survive in their early childhood environment. And so we all come out of different environments where we took on these strategies to try to get our needs met, to try to get belonging and love, and sometimes even just the essential things that we think we need to survive. And so we put in place these strategies that become how we perceive what we're perceiving in our environment. what we become highly attuned to. And then these patterns get formed as we use these strategies to get our needs met. And so I think it's really important to see eights as young children that grew up in environments for whatever reason where they didn't get a sense of trust that their needs were going to be met, and therefore really took it upon themselves to get those needs met. They learned to be very tough and independent as children, often as a way of protecting themselves. Sometimes we can imagine eights have this force field around them, around 3 feet around them, and we often bump into that with eights in our lives, and we feel this energy that comes from them that they built up around them to keep themselves safe and secure. And I think we can see young children doing that again as a way of trying to get their needs met. They as children they believe that a best defense is a strong offense, so they go towards that which they're concerned about. And as children, they learned that the best way to not be controlled is to actually control. And it's interesting, often 8 parents beget 8 children, and you can see that dynamic there, that in order to deal with an 8, you really have to create your strong exterior. You have to come, and not in order to not be controlled, you have to push back. So we often see multiple 8s in families, which is an interesting dynamic to look at. Children, they often report that they felt betrayed by trusted others, often by parents, or it could be other people, and responded by not trusting others, but then turning in to trust their own power. And so that's the energy that we see behind 8s. They also all have a fear of letting their guard down, because if they did let their guard down, they would be hurt. So we see this real strong response to fear is what moves them, motivates them moving forward, in a lack of trust. And so that's why they put up a strong guard around them in order to not be hurt. So those are some of the dynamics that we see with an 8. And now let's look at a little bit more fuller understanding of them. This chart is kind of a basic chart that gives us some descriptors of the 8. On the right here, we have levels, and that's what we were beginning to look at. At the bottom, there's lines of stress and lines of integration. In the Enneagram, we talk about when we're under stress, we take on certain behaviors of other numbers, or in times where we're integrating, or non-stress situations, we take on the characteristics of others. So here we see the lines for the 8. Under stress, 8s go to a 5. And that looks like a real introversion move for 8s. They can often isolate from other people when they get overwhelmed. And that's not really often a good place for 8s to go. They're primarily extroverts on the Myers-Briggs, and so they retreat inward, and it can be seen in the form of kind of brooding, or they become antisocial because they don't feel like they can trust other people. So they move in, and often that move can be pretty dark for 8s, because they begin feeling like they can't trust, and they begin feeling paranoid about other people that are going to try to sabotage them, or have ill will towards them. And their isolating moves them out of relationship, so they don't have ways of checking their assumptions, which are often negative. Again, that probably came from their experience as children. So they have this assumption that you are out to hurt them, or you're out to get them. And so when they move inward, one of the things that happens is they often lose the relationships of the communication strategies in order to maybe get a clearer picture of what your intention is. And in the place of that, they often project negative intention on you. And that becomes a place where they can get very uh, paranoid, and they start planning how they're going to take control. So it's a kind of a conniving space often for eights about how they're going to get control or maneuver so that they can regain power. Now, when eights open up their heart towards integration, when they feel comfortable with you and when they trust you, eights have a huge heart. They become the bear that's like the teddy bear. And there's this really beautiful space inside the trust of an eight. They will protect you. They can be emotionally connected and emotionally responsive when they feel like they trust you and they're in a good space, when they feel confident and comfortable. Eights can invite you into their inner lives and often do develop a deep sense of trust with and friendships with those that they care about and trust. And that looks like moving to an eight, to a eights moving to a two, where they have this emotional intelligence and emotional care for other people when they're integrating. Now, we can look at the wings up here at the top. The 8 with a 9 wing is kind of called the bear, which is interesting because we don't often associate the bear with Enneagram 9s. But what that looks like is they're in touch with this instinctual energy to a high degree. And so they really come at people. They almost exude this outward energy. The 8 that goes to a 7 moves more into their lustful desire for pleasure, like the 7 does. So they become independent and often take on some of the characteristics of the greed or the outward getting what you need. Their lust for life can often manifest in addictions or behaviors that 7s take on, which are strong being an independent person. And again, they're independent because they don't trust that others will meet their needs. So like the 7, they go out to get their own needs met. So these are some of the, we'll look at the instinctual variants here with another diagram. These are some archetypical energies for 8s. And the subtypes are called the self-preservation type, which is in the black. The red is the sexual type. So self-preservation types are concerned about their own physical needs and wants. And we can see this in the 8 here. The 8 with the 9 wing is the enduring protector, or the powerful survivor. And 8 towards 7 is the resourceful realist. Again, your subtype is kind of another way of nuancing your number. The sexual subtypes of the 8 could be the assertive lover, or the chivalrous lover, or a bold lover. But again, that's their move towards individual relationships or primary concern for them, often seen as the sexual or the one-on-one type. And then the social types are more concerned about their social place and social hierarchies. And so here you can see there's a lot of the leader imagery. One is a strong ruler. The other is a triumphant leader, and a confident initiator is the 8 with a 7 wing. So you can see these kind of nuances around leadership, especially with the social subtype, that are much more extroverted and concerned with their social place and social location. So those are some ways to nuance the 8's behavior. If we want to keep looking at the Myers-Briggs, again, Myers-Briggs is kind of came from the Jungian personality type. A lot of you may know this. If we take a deeper look at the Enneagram, we see that they're almost always extroverts, like sevens. Um, this type is a strong extroverted type. Some of the differences here, though, are between their N and their S. They're intuitive and they're sensing. So they can be both of those. They are strong thinking types. So a 9 is what we would call an introverted thinking type. An extroverted thinking type. They're almost always T's, and they have a strong kind of thinking capacity. And another difference, though, is they can be J's or P's. So they can be judgmental, wanting order and structure, or they can be more open and flowy, like P's, as perceivers. But so if we were to look at it from a Myers-Briggs perspective, we would say they're primarily extroverted thinking types. And here is really where, so often in the second half of life, we talk about where is the space where we need to grow as individuals. And in the Jungian understanding of individuation, we move to cultivating what's called the inferior aspect. And for eights, the inferior aspect is their feeling function or their emotional attunement to life. And so in the second half of life, this really is the direction of health for eights, is cultivating their feeling function, their emotional capacity, their emotional intelligence, and their ability to trust other people one is to trust themselves with their own emotional life, that won't be overwhelming for them, that they can handle it. Again, if control is a primary issue, emotions can be difficult for highly controlling people because emotions often can't be controlled and we feel overwhelmed by them. So cultivating for an 8, their emotional life, emotional intelligence is important, especially in the second half of life. That's from a Jungian individuation perspective. So a couple of other slides. Here are famous 8s. So we can see these personality types: Sigourney Weaver, Martin Luther King, Glenn Close, and Sean Connery. And as I was saying earlier, one of the most strong 8s that we know is our current president. And we can see in a lot of his behaviors, and a judgment here, but what seems like an unhealthy 8. And so we often see what's happening right now is feelings of loss of control, loss of trust of those around him, and he doesn't seem to be in a very healthy place as an 8 at the moment. Now, I think where we need to have compassion here is, how do we understand the early childhood environment that created Trump as an 8? And I think this is where we can really have compassion for someone who feels out of control, and has maybe felt out of control as a child. And the only way he knew how to get what he felt like he needed was to take control, and to be forceful, to move forward towards people. But again, that comes because a loss of a sense of trust, and then a huge fear of being hurt, so that you have to put up this protective image, and be domineering in order to take control. So this really is the space that I am able to cultivate compassion for President Trump, and realizing that his early childhood environment, my early childhood environment created something different, but we all had those environments. And so when I see him, I often see a struggling child that doesn't trust other people, that had to take on a lot of responsibility to get his own needs met. And so he put into place strategies to do that. And we all did that. And so I can appreciate that I did that in different ways, and that he did that as well. So it helps me see him as a human, and some of the challenges that I'm sure that he's working with now in the situation that he is in. So I just wanted to share that because I think we can see those personality characteristics manifesting in him. The Hornerian groups are how do you get your needs met? And so we can see that different personality types do that in different ways. Um, uh, the 7, the 8, and the 3 are what we call the aggressive types. So they move towards other people to get their needs met. And 7s and 3s do that as well. They're assertive and can be aggressive in getting their needs met. And we see down here that the type 8, Enneagram type 8s move against people by being aggressive and asserting themselves against others in hopes of earning autonomy. 7s are similar to that. They're move against people by being aggressive and satisfying their desires in hopes of earning security. So, and 3s are also aggressive against people in their goals and hopes of earning attention. So you see they're trying to get something. 3s are trying to get attention. 7s are trying to get security. And 8s are trying to get autonomy. But they all do that by moving against or the assertive or the being aggressive in getting that need met. It's a different need, but they have a similar strategy in doing that. So want to look at, here's some information that we'll begin to close with on, again, understanding some of the deeper issues. When we come up here and look at lost childhood message, you will not be betrayed. Again, 8s do feel like they're going to be betrayed. And so trust is a really difficult thing to offer, because when they felt like they did trust, they ended up being hurt. The unconscious message is just not okay to be vulnerable or to trust anyone. And we can see that deep fear in them, the fear of being harmed, controlled, or violated. And the basic desire that emerges from that is to protect oneself. The secondary fear is of becoming weak or vulnerable or losing one's independence. Because if you have to rely on another person to get your needs met, that may not happen. So vulnerability, losing independence can be a strong dynamic in an 8. Some of the ways we can be with 8s and invite 8s into their own health. The saving grace for the 8 is I know that confrontations threaten my survival. And what's meant by that, I know that confrontations threaten my survival, is that they have to realize, 8s need to realize that this confrontive or combative stance that they often took on actually doesn't serve them getting their needs met, that it actually diminishes the capacity for their own thriving and surviving. And so that really is a saving grace when they can realize these confrontive behaviors aren't actually getting them what they need. They're actually threatening their survival. And if they can wake up to that, then they can reimagine and reprogram themselves to not have as conflictual or confrontive relationships. And that will actually help them get what they're wanting, which is, safety, getting their needs met, and the realization that what they've put in place may not be actually helping, but may be hurting them. The healing attitude is maybe this person isn't out to take advantage of me. For 8s to be able to trust or to give over a sense that maybe they're not out to get me, and maybe I can let down my guard. I can be more open and vulnerable, and maybe I could let my heart be touched more deeply. Yeah, you can translate that currently to what I think we can see in the current president, with President Trump. Wish that he could let down some of the vulnerability, and yet we know that he feels attacked when he does that. And so I think us to have empathy and compassion towards him is the only way in which that guard may be let down. Recognition for growth is recognizing my own vulnerability and need for nurturing. And the spiritual jumpstart is to notice when I'm trying to force things or control life. Direction of growth, we've already talked about, is learning to I learned to use whatever power I have to nurture others as individuals, identify with rather than against others. Ultimately, I see myself as a servant to others, and I extend myself by love. And again, healthy eights really do a great job of that. And you can feel that from healthy eights. So I don't know if there are questions off of Facebook that you have for me that I would be happy to help answer. Again, that's kind of a preview of eights and how we can work with them and have compassion for them. So if there are anything on, anybody on Zoom have a question, or anybody on Facebook have a question that I can answer? If not, we have a question. What questions might we ask to coach eights towards growth? Yeah, thank you, Melanie. I think, yeah, working with eights, let's go back to, well, I do think the Myers-Briggs is helpful. Helping eights get in touch with their emotional life and their real fears and mistrust of other people. So I think working with eights, let's go back to this last slide. I really think, yeah, working with eights to actually see if they can take little steps in trusting other people. I think helping them rationally make a distinction, again, because eights naturally, to protect themselves, project that they're not safe or they can't trust people. And that's not always true, but I don't know that eights feel like, so I think taking little steps towards trust and then evaluating what happened when they did that would be a healthy place for eights to go. Also, for them to really be in touch with their fear. They seem unafraid, but their fear is really strong. And so if they can work with their fear, they can feel it in their bodies and allow it to not get expressed in this force field around them. And then actually look at it. Is it a rational fear or an irrational fear? Am I projecting an early childhood experience of trauma onto the other, which doesn't necessarily need to be there? Therefore, I don't need to put up my guard. I can be more trusting. I think those are some of the ways in working with eights or coaching eights. Another thing that I didn't say in working with eights is a lot of times we back down from eights in our relationship with them because we find them often overpowering. But eights actually like it if we will step up and meet them, whether it be in an argument or that our energy can meet their energy in its level of intensity. Because what happens when that happens is they trust us. They know where we are. So like if our force field can bump up against their force field, often they have an appreciation of that because they trust you. They trust you to be honest. They trust you to meet them. But if we back away from them and get quiet, they fear that we are going to go around the side and hurt them, or we're plotting against them. Again, the paranoia. So if we'll be really upfront with them, meet them where they are, meet their energy with a similar level of energy, there's a trust that happens in those encounters. And so if you have an 8 in your life, if you can meet them in some ways, not overly power them, again, because that would make them reactive. But if we can meet them with where they are, there's a level of trust there. If we can be, vulnerable and trustworthy, that is the way into a more healthy relationship with an 8. But that's hard, I think, at times when we feel like we're going to be mowed over by their energy or taken over by their energy. And I'm not saying don't be protective of that, but kind of meet them. And in my experience is there's a level of trust that happens in meeting 8s with a similar energy. Thanks, Melanie, for the question. I hope that was helpful. I don't know if there are other questions on Facebook or other questions you may have. If not, again, thank you for joining our Enneagram community. Next week will be our last week. We are going to cover the 9s, and that will go through our whole series. Interfaith Paths to Peace is not doing programming next week besides our Enneagram 9 next Friday. We're taking a couple of weeks off to reevaluate our programming, and so we will be sending out a link for those of you that have been participating in IPP programming. We would love for you to take a survey that talks about all the different programs that we've been offering and putting together our schedule for next year. So thank you for being a part of this today. Join us next week for our final look at the Enneagram 9s, and hope you have a peaceful and meaningful afternoon. Thanks for being with us. Peace.